Welcome to the Georgetown Library. Earlier this summer we spoke with them about some goat stuff here, and tonight we wanted to present a little bit more. We always get asked what we do with GoatsToGo in terms of how does it all work, when do you book, how do you know if goats can be used on our place to cut grass or brush. So my father, Austyn Olson, he owns this business, and basically tonight we're going to go through a small presentation, a little bit about the setup, and then we also have a big poster with a bunch of pictures and projects that we've been doing over the last 5 years that can tell you a little bit more about the different projects we've done and the different types, and go into a little bit more about why you should choose goats instead of chemicals or other landscaping techniques for your backyards that have poison ivy and other things. So to start, my name is Michelle Olson. I live here in Georgetown. Just moved back after being away for 13 years, and I live down on Pond Street. And my father?
And I'm Austyn Olson, her father. And I'm the one that has the goats, and she's been doing all kinds of things with them ever since then. And we do get them out to up throughout the countryside, all through Essex County, and even down into Boston.
So tonight we'll start off with the little presentation, and then, like I said, go into the poster session. So thank you all for coming tonight. We're excited to tell you about what we've been doing. So in another couple weeks, in a month, we're going to be presenting at a conference in Nashville. So this is the title of our presentation for Nashville. It's called Effective Use of Goat Browsing as an Application for Invasive Species Control in the Northeast Suburbs. The problem here mostly is poison ivy, which everyone probably has had poison ivy, and it's not fun to have. So here I have a few pictures. To start, I have on the left side, I have a picture of a boar goat up into some bittersweet, which is ivy that kind of strangles trees. And so there's a boar goat there, and then another boar goat in another section up in a tree, and basically they're going after the brush and the ivy that they like to eat. And Dad, you can jump in, or anybody, you can jump in with any questions you might have. One of the main things we get is, why would I want to use goats? What do they do? Well, there's many different traditional methods of weed control. We always go for the quick fix nowadays. A lot of people want chemicals, but there are a lot of different avenues. Weeds are considered a nuisance or an invasive species, which is not natural or takes over all the natural species in one area. So a lot of that renders areas in the Northeast unusable. For instance, you're not going to be hacking through a lot of ivy and brush to play with your dogs at a recreational park or your backyard even. So weeds are an area that's a nuisance to woodland areas, recreational, and backyards. Some of the traditional methods that they use for controlling weeds are mechanical.
And we know what poison ivy is like here. Being in Georgetown, growing up this area here, there's poison ivy is something we all know about. And one of the things, talking to people, the first thing they ask, they talk about how allergic they think. I walk by that stuff and I catch it, and they don't want anything to do with it. There's all kinds of stories about allergies and people making mistakes and getting in a real mess. And the dogs go in this stuff. It's everywhere around here. The dogs go into it. The dogs can sit on the couch. They get the oil off the dog. They get on the skin. They catch it that way there. So, as she said a minute ago, we'll talk more about it. There's a lot of different ways of addressing invasive species, and this is just one of them. Mm-hmm. And it's not always the answer for everything.
Yeah, we'll show tonight some success stories and unsuccessful stories. But the goats really enjoy any ivy and brush. They eat woodsy things, which it's called their browsing versus grazing. And there's another slide that will demonstrate that. But as my dad said, there's not always one technique, and sometimes stuff is too rich that the goats can't get to. So you need mechanical, which is a way to cut your path in for the animals to get to the vegetation. Cutting is also a way that they actually start to cut down the vegetation so that animals can start to eat the shrubs, and basically they eat the leaves off of it. So mechanical, you chop, you kind of till, you can mow different areas. you can't really mow a lot of the stuff that's creeping up, like on the first slide I showed you with the ivy all the way up the tree. So the best thing for that, second best thing is chemicals. They go in and they do treatment on location, which is spots, which is the first type I have up here is Roundup and Rodeo. It's a glyphosate based chemical, and that is to hit specific areas. The next one
Now, to
is,
steal somebody's thunder about that, there's a girl out that has about 1,200 goats out in the Midwest,
yeah.
right? And her comment is, she says she got a degree in weed control, and she said, we've been trying to poison this stuff for 50 years. You'd think we've had them all. Well, there's just as many weeds as today as there was then.
Yes.
And even more so, the trade name, Roundup, they're putting out in 2014, for example, they put out 250 million pounds of that onto the ground across the country here. We'll talk a little bit about that later, some of the negative effects of it.
And I was just at a conference actually a few weeks ago out in Fort Collins, Colorado, talking about different treatments. And another way that they treat the chemicals is they do area lifts, and they actually drop it down into different areas, and they selectively treat where there's invasives or nuisance species. Out west, it's a lot of grass forbs that are overtaking savannas out there. So,
Now, can I talk one more thing about chemicals?
yes.
Some of the invasive species that we have are pretty remarkable, and that's why they're invasives. We have an invasive species that actually started in Newburyport in the 1800s, and it's called leafy spurge. It's actually pretty. You'll see it all around town. It looks like a yellow flower. It's not. It's really a leaf. That's got a taproot that goes down about 20 feet into the ground, and it disperses seeds. 15 seeds. It shoots 15 seeds every pod, so 15 feet out. And it grows by seeds, but it also grows by continuing to with the taproot, and it just spreads out. Now that's actually will burn people, cattle, cows, and stuff like that, horses. So they'll take, and if they eat it, there's a milk that comes out of it, and it'll burn. So Mother Nature's created it so that the cows won't take it. So it's traveling through the whole Midwest now, and they can't seem to stop it. And the cows stay away from it because they know they got a blister up and they can't eat. Goats and sheep love it, and they actually go after it. Now, what's that got to do with chemicals? Well, leafy spurge, you can take a chemical like glyphosate, Roundup, and you can put it on and poison that plant. It'll go down to the taproot, and the plant has developed a way to disperse the chemical and actually get it out of its root system and come right back like you were feeding it the poison. So these invasives have some pretty good ways of dispersing themselves with chemicals, and the chemicals don't always work. Or they would be using them out west where they're really losing grazing land to some of the stuff.
Thank you. So another thing that is important to change all types of trends and how we're using and bringing in, and actually we're the ones who introduced most of the invasive species that have now taken over and out-competed with native plants. So one of the other things is cultural changes, cultural awareness of issues with the various plants that you plant in your backyard, even that then can spread really quickly through the root systems, or seed pollination through bees or birds that also transport it. So culturally, we want to be able to buy more native species, more plants, and that's another way to help to remove the invasive species that have taken over. Another thing that's really big, especially out west, and there's a lot of debates going on, is burning, prescribed burning for fire control, because the underbrush is what it increases the fire growth. So it will burn really fast when there's a lot of undergrowth and you have wind. So basically burning and composting and actually removing it. Years ago I actually helped remove species, and we picked 3 years in a row, you pick mustard seed, and mustard seed spread into different areas that we brought over to outcompete and get rid of another species. So you pick the root system for 3 years, and then it doesn't come back. So an interesting thing my father can tell you about is a little bit of demonstration that we've done on our own farm here in Georgetown with poison ivy, and after so many treatments it actually doesn't come back. The last one, which is what we're talking about tonight, is considered biological. Biological is using animals or living organisms, sometimes it's insects, to get rid of invasive species. You can also use a fungi, but whatever. We're here to talk about target grazing. Target grazing is you just don't let animals out everywhere, but you actually selectively identify the species that you want to remove. Mostly here in the U.S., the Northeast, it's poison ivy for us. And we put the goats in a concentrated area, which is called target grazing, and then they eat the species that you want them to eat. So, as my father Alan said too, that not all combinations of treatment work for different species. It depends on what is there. We've found a lot of success in poison ivy, bittersweet, multi-rosa flora, and other species. So a study that I learned about recently, they did a 6-year study, cutting and then treatment with goat management for the next 6 years helped to eradicate and help develop back the area back to the savanna, and that was in Iowa. So the next slide here, how does it all work? That's the biggest question we get. What? How did that happen? How does it all work?
Yeah, I'm going to pass this around. That's close up of that picture.
We
Maybe
have
you
a
pass this
close-up
around.
of it too.
Maybe I'd like to see it. You can take and
Hello.
get it back later. A little close. Hello.
Hello there. So how the slide that's going around now is basically a blown up slide of these before and afters. This is a great example of before and after. You can see here a rock wall, and the rock wall has a bunch of ivy and forbs and everything on it on the before, and then afterwards you can see the stone wall.
You know what, Shel? When you look at that picture, you'll notice what you're going to see here is that this here wall, you can't see it. There's a beautiful garden in Boxford. There's a beautiful gardens, a whole series of gardens, very large gardens, right out to the side. They actually abandoned this wall because they mowed on the sides of it. They said they could not get all this poison ivy. It was coming up the trees. The gardeners and the landscapers said that was enough. So so they wanted to do something with it. That was less than 24 hours.
And how many goats did you use?
I think we used about 10.
10.
Typically, on small jobs, we'll bring 8 to 10 goats, and that's enough. Now we bring 8 to 10 goats because they'll compete with each other. We want them to compete for the food, and in the end, what they have is they leave these stems. You can see the small sticks. They strip the leaves right off the thing, and you just have stems left over. And then they went forward and they've been cleaning up the wall.
Yeah.
So in this case here, that's what they did. If they come back again next year, they can actually get rid of the stuff by the use of the goats. Mm-hmm. Multiple attempts.
The most important thing here is the picture of the goat. We have fainting goats. I'll actually show you a few more slides in the next one. The picture to the left of the goat is actually bittersweet, which is strangling that tree. And if you can see, that's a tree that's been twisted because ivy's breaking that tree and actually twisting it. And we actually have a big job that we're going to have in the spring out in Natick that's they're trying to save the trees. They have so much ivy that is actually breaking the trees that they need to keep a baseline between their property and the neighboring community. So in order to have that buffer, those trees are expensive, and they want to treat using our goats. They've treated by cutting, and that's still not helping their case.
It's near the Constituent River, I think is the name.
Yes,
right, river.
and chemical use.
And chemicals is not really some option that they want to use.
Yeah.
We see that. You see this a lot. You'll see this right around town. When you get these bittersweets, they get as big as your arm, and they climb to the top of the tree, and then they just grow it on the tree. They suffocate the tree, and then they just slowly pull it down with its own weight, and then eventually you get a snowstorm, or you'll get anything like that, and crack. The tree will come down. It could be a beautiful ornamental tree. It'll just come crashing right down. So in many ways, it's pulling these trees down. So it ruins some nice trees, and it's pretty aggressive. Now the goats can't climb the trees that high. So what we have to do is, we want to go in and cut that stuff. And you should cut it any place you see it, so it doesn't get carried away like that. And then the goats can work can work the even yourself. You can work on keeping that from growing again.
Yeah, management over time with goats is a great thing. So here we have not a very small operation. We are here in Georgetown, like I said, we have 50 acres, but we also manage over 150 acres in the surrounding area. And we've accumulated populated by having babies. So this year we had over 30 baby goats. So this year now we have a little over 80 goats. And we also use sheep. Sheep, there's another slide I'll tell you a little bit more about our sheep, but sheep and goats are good at eating. They eat the same, a little bit of the same things, but goats are more into shrubby stuff and sheep are more into grasslands. The other thing we were talking about, this is a good solution for the 3 E's, I call them. Economically, it's affordable, more so than thousands of dollars you can use every single year for herbicides or insecticides or pesticides and different things. It's ecologically friendly as well as environmentally friendly. Like this picture shows you here, hard to reach areas that a mower can't get. These goats will go in and you don't need to treat on that stone wall to be able to remove the species. So it's great for backyards and areas that are recreational parks. The poster will tell you a little bit more about the Danvers Dog Park that we did, as well as along the Charles River in Boston for sensitive areas that had that were near watersheds. So,
now, the dog park in Danvers was actually interesting. There wasn't a lot of poison ivy, but if you look at the picture, they built a beautiful park. It was incredibly big dogs in one park, but small dogs in the other, and they had poison ivy that kept popping up, and they couldn't get rid of it. But what happened is it was surrounded by a wetlands, and even though it was a town park, the conservation had made them do all kinds of things, so they didn't want to use poisons. They didn't want people bringing their dogs in the dog park and rolling around and getting some poison ivy on them and then collecting it themselves. So that's when they called the goats. Now I think we had actually one of the TV stations was down there for that one. I wasn't there. The guy that managed our herder, he was down there and they talked to him. So that's why they used it in the dog parks.
So as you just mentioned, we set up our own fencing. The next slide will tell you a little bit more about our setup. But here this tells you that we target the species, which is mostly poison ivy and bittersweet. We target that by fencing off different areas. And we have a section of the fence here that you can feel and touch a little bit. It's electric fencing. One, it helps keep the goats in the area that we want them to eat, but it also helps protect them.
And you can see it in the
from
slide.
Predators. Yeah,
we actually fenced the wall in, and the beautiful gardens on the other side were untouched.
The most important thing about this, though, is look at how cute those goats are. Well, we don't want you to touch them. That's what brings people to be able to watch them and enjoy them as they're there munching away if they're doing their job. So if there's no questions, I will move to the next slide. Here, I just tried to give you, it's a little wordy, but you don't have to really read it. The big gist here is to tell you that we have a whole fleet of equipment to move our goats. Most important thing for goats is shelter. The picture here in the on the bottom right is a picture of some goats hanging out in shavings, and that is one of the trailers. The trailers are set up to automatically provide a run-in. The goats don't like to get wet, and they don't like it direct sunlight, so they like to get shade. There's hay in there in case they happen to eat all the vegetation in one area, and before they're moved, and there's automatic watering. So those are really important things for goats to have as shelter. So we either leave one of our trailers there in areas that are more remote that you can't really access with the trailer. We bring a pop-up tent and put the water and everything underneath that for them to be able to go in.
Not all, as you said earlier, it's not all success stories. This was in Ipswich, and the material they had at the top of the hill, we've cleaned it out pretty well, but they call it a green briar. We've all seen just the good old briar. You can't walk through it. It grabs your pants. It's got big green leaves on it. Goats are supposed to eat it. They're supposed to like it. They ate it. They didn't ravage it. They didn't go after it. So they were there. They didn't destroy it. It wasn't going to work out well. It did clear the area. It was very difficult. You can see how far downhill it is. I think you can see my wife Maureen in the middle up there with the goats, and it was way down. You couldn't get up the hill. It was a hard walk up. The goats didn't mind that. We just let them go. They came from the trailer up the hill. They went and they ate. So we would like to have seen it been more successful, but it isn't. Something people ask us a lot about certain plants, like the American bamboo that we kind of all see around at bamboo plants. Well, if the goats would just go after that and just destroy it, I'd probably be a wealthy man, because everybody has a problem with that and you can't get rid of it. They will eat it, and they'll work at it. They'll peck at it if you've got the time. for us to go, for you to hire us to come in and bring the goats in, it's not always that effective. But it has worked. It'll control it. We have a patch of it on our farm where the goats get to. And instead of being 8 feet high, so you can't see it, it's about this high right now. It's just a little few green leaves on it. So some things are about managing, not eradicating. Phragmites is a plant that's used in the marsh. It's in every town. It's right down here on East Main Street. You'll see it. Down before Spalding's, you'll see some of it. It looks like the feathers on the top of it. You'll see it in the marshes. It looks like a marsh reed. Phragmites is something that's a grazable. They can't kill it. They're burning it. They chemical in it. They're bulldozing it. The University of Maryland's got test patches. They're trying to destroy it. They can't figure out how to deal with it. But you can manage it. It was used as a fodder in Europe. But they don't really like it either. You'd have to put them in specifically target grazing. You have to fence them into that, so that's what they have to eat. They know what they like to eat better than we do.
Yes, they'll go after what they like first. As my father was mentioning earlier, the goats all start to attack the same thing. And the reason for that is goats are jealous. They like to compete with the other goats. So if they see one of the goats, and I'm going to show you a video in just a second, so one of the goats gets up in the trees, and there's tons of other goats. And usually what they do, the bigger goats knock down big trees so they're higher up, which are usually our boar goats, and they knock it down and everybody else comes up.
Bushes.
The bushes, yes, or tree, like the leaves. So I'm going to see if this works real quick.
There's one of our dogs here, Michelle. The Great Pyrenees. Did you talk about them?
Nope, I did not.
We'll get back to them later, but there's the Great Pyrenees. There's some dogs that we use here with the llamas for coyotes.
Yes.
And there was a lot of coyotes at our house last night, so we know they're around.
Yes, so let me just take a moment here and
Now, the Great Pyrenees they're interesting. These two are actually rescues. We took and we got them out of the rescue area. We were like crossing our fingers because sometimes you get a rescue, you don't know what problems come with them. They came to it naturally. It's a natural thing for them to protect the livestock. They live with the livestock, and they patrol at night more than anything else. They do a lot of barking, kind of woof woof. There's a big dog here. Don't come around my sheep. We had 100 sheep in Raleigh over in Mansion Hill over there, and they were quite a rugged place. You would think you were in Vermont. And what happened is the farmer goes, we had 3 coyotes came in last night, and you have to slide on.
It's sideways.
So it's a little sideways. So the farmer said, I can't find the coyotes. I said, when you saw him last night, what was he doing? He said, well, he was sitting there. And I goes, and the sheep were all surrounded in a big circle behind him, right? I goes, he's not going to fight if he doesn't have to. I said, but he makes the sheep get all in a circle behind him, and he sits out in front of them, and he takes in, and he's just don't come any closer, you know. If he has to do what he has to do, he will. But he's protecting the sheep. He couldn't find him the next morning, and he said, well, where do you think he is? I goes, he found him, he's sitting on a stump. I goes, really? Big high stump. I says, and it's where the coyotes were seen, right? He says, yep. I said, well, you're going to see him there for the next week and a half because he's going to be watching that spot, waiting for those coyotes to come in. So the Great Pyrenees are very effective at watching what goes on, anything from the sky. Around here we don't have it. In Florida we have owls and eagles take the lambs. They watch things from the sky. They watch things from all around from coming in. And
unfortunately,
the other thing that we use is a llama. And the llama is a resident of Georgetown. He stays here, or she stays here. Llamas dislike canines tremendously, and because of the dislike for canines, they're very effective with coyotes. They're a big animal. They stand really high. They're always on alert, and their ears are up. And if something comes into that area with the baby, we send them out. We send them out back a lot with the baby goats. We might have them out there with 40 or 50 baby goats or sheep, or even 100. And he just kind of patrols out there, and we really haven't lost anything to predators with the coyotes. I mean, with the llama out there. Again, he's a big animal. He'll do what he has to do to make sure that no self-respecting coyote wants to hang around the llama. So we typically don't have to. We don't have to typically worry about predatory things. We know they're there. like I say, at our house last night, we know there was, at 3:30 in the morning, they were out in the yard and they were going to town. So it's predator, they're there, but they don't always just attack just because it's the coyotes and the sheep and the coyotes and the lamb. These electric fences keep them out, and that works very effectively. So predators aren't always an issue. A veterinarian just told me recently, he said, we were talking, we have a section over in West Newbury where we keep the goats, and he was examining them to go to Florida, because they live in Florida for the winter. That's where they reside, and they have their babies and they rest for the year. He said his instructor in vet school said there's only two things that are going to kill a goat: dogs and domestic parasites. And we can talk about
Well,
that
I
later.
can't get one of the videos going. This is another one we have.
It's the dog park here in Danvers.
Yes.
Oh, that's not the dog park, but this is the,
Goats West Pit.
well, next time we'll get some volume or we can read his lips. But
I didn't.
it was quite an impressive dog park. They didn't cheat on this
But the
thing.
goats took care of it. The poison ivy doesn't affect them.
Not at all. Like you eating a chocolate candy bar, they eat poison ivy.
Costing the town around $500. The goats and sheep have the area cleared of the plant within 2 days, creating some major goat skating.
They just, bam, they get right into it. And 99% of the time, they just go right for the trees with all the poison ivy crawling up.
Eating grass is not these guys' only occupation. They're also available for parties and different events. You can head over to NECN.com. We'll have more information there. For now, we're in Georgetown. I'm Glenn Marshall, NECN.
So that's just a video clip that was a few years ago that we had. Unfortunately, I'm having technical difficulties because I had to switch computers at the last second, so I can't get my other videos to work. So we'll hopefully get those fixed, and I can show people if you'd like afterwards. So let's get our presentation back up here. This computer is a little old, so it's a little slow.
So one of the things that we have, we're not talking about goats to go as far as eating vegetation, and we'll talk about it a little later, maybe at the end. Is Michelle's been taking the baby goats. It's been a fun time for us to watch. She says, you know, we're going to do some goats in yoga. I goes, what are you going to do? I said, okay. So her mother and I said, fine. We got 30, 40 baby goats, and their job for the summer is just to grow up. They'll just be kids and grow up. Well, they've been out there as little kids. They've been doing goats to yoga with them, and there's been a lot of smiley faces up at the farm with this here. So that's something that's been a little offshoot of what we've been doing with the goats. Some of the things that are an issue. I gotta get this cut. One of the things that we deal with is seeds. If you have an invasive species, whether it's poison ivy seed or any other types of seeds, what will happen with a lot of animals is the seed will be eaten and it'll pass through, and you actually spread the seed that way. So if you bring them to, I bring them to your house, and there's an invasive species, if there's something we don't like, leafy spurge or something like that, and then they move off to your house, then what'll happen is that they deposit their they do their duty out there, and the seed is now planted on another piece of property. Goats don't do that. They have a way of grinding. They grind their seeds, and they kill the seed. And as Michelle told me the other night, there's also more of an acidic type of thing in their stomach. After it's ground up, it actually kills the seeds. So goats don't pass seeds through alive to be used.
To regerminate the area, yes.
So this is a slide. This is my favorite slide. She can talk to you about that. But this is my favorite slide. This is really, these two little circles here show you exactly the feeding preferences of goats, sheep, and cattle, also in this case here. The interesting thing is goats like to eat up. That means their head's in the air, and they like to start as high as they can. They work their way down. So they eat with their head up in the air all the time. Sheep like to eat from the grass and work their way up. They eat very many of the same things, as you can see, the circles of the 3 different triangles. Forbs are weeds, flowers, ragweed, you know, and non-grass type of thing. And then we have grass and browse. So we have forbs, browse, and grass there. So they overlap. We may get to some places and it's a lot of grass. Well, there's a lot of grass there. The goats aren't going to do anything. The goats will eat grass, but they don't really want to. They want to reach up, remember. They want to get up high. So we'll mix sheep. We'll have more sheep than we will have goats. That may be the case like the landfill cap here in Georgetown, Covanta landfill cap up there, or actually we did a solar farm. We've done some solar farm work over in Bradford.
We have more pictures over here.
Whereas if you get stuff that's just a really thick, heavy brush area, well, the goats, they love it. That's their area, and the sheep are like, oh boy, this is not our favorite stuff to have. So, you want to go ahead with this, John?
So this is, again, a slide that just talks, everyone always asks us, how do you know if it's going to work? How do you know if it's going to be successful? Well, not everything's successful, but you can actually train goats to eat certain things. So there's different ways to train them for different things that are a problem in various areas. And there's a whole philosophy on that, and we've spoken to professors out in Iowa State and everything that's going to help us train our goats to eat a certain thing. So, for instance, just last week we had pumpkins. We made pumpkins, we carved them, and we threw them out. The llama loved them, but the goats didn't really care for them. They nibbled at them a little because the llama was interested. The reason why is because if we sprinkle sugar on there or something sweet, they'd probably eat it. They have to adapt themselves to eating that, so they didn't take to pumpkins right away. But they love poison ivy. Little babies, when we had them earlier this year, there was a few pieces, they weren't eating it. Again, they need to be trained and they learn from other goats. Goats are very smart. So all my baby goats, luckily, that we used, it wouldn't have been good for everyone that came to play with them this summer. They are taught to eat poison ivy, I think, mostly by their parents. So
after they finish,
after
they're through the goats to go, the
yoga.
goats and yoga.
Yes.
We don't mix them up.
yes, so we measure the success by selecting the best animal for the job. As my dad just talked about, the goats and the sheep kind of have a little overlap. So we quote every job individually. So my father or Jamie goes out and they look at the jobs to figure out how many goats, how much time, and how many sheep. Sometimes we'll throw in some sheep if there's grass there because the sheep will rather eat the grass. So, and let the goats do the other work. So we'll figure that out. Some of the biggest things in the Northeast are poison ivy, buckthorn, and oriental bittersweet, like we talked about the strangling of the plants. I do have a little bit more information over here on that type of invasive species, but the buckthorn is considered buckwheat and the oriental bittersweet, which can't be confused with its sister American bittersweet, which is a native species. They are poison ivy and American bittersweet are nuisance species, and the other ones are invasive, meaning they're not natural to this area. We actually brought over the oriental bittersweet in the 1800s, and it spread from the Northeast out. It goes all the way over to Minnesota and halfway through the country. So it's a problem everywhere. People always look at the jobs we do. This is the example down the bottom next to the strangled trees of what's left behind. Do they make it look beautiful? The answer is no. They go after all the leaves on the stems, so they do about 90% of the area. You're not going to have any greenage. The most important things that they do is they stress the plant. They stress the plant enough that if you hit it early in the spring, they're not going to be able to reproduce, and they're not going to be able to, they're going to be stressed to the point that they're not going to reproduce, and they're not going to spread their seeds, and they're not going to have more life come back. Now, over time, like I said, poison ivy in particular, we've studied it. You need to hit it once in the spring, once in the fall, maybe another time in the spring. So you hit it 3 times and you stress that plant so that it doesn't really grow back. It will over time. So we usually go in and we hit something. We start in about May to June when things are green, but as they're just starting to sprout up. If you get them later in the season, it still does the work, but you're not stressing them the same way. So success of getting it is getting it early or before they start to die in the fall. because we stopped doing it, was it Labor Day?
Labor
And
Day.
some people still continued, people around this area are still continuing to this day to do goat browsing, but it's not helping other than you're killing stuff that it's already going to die on its own for the winter. So you're not really helping to remove it or to eradicate it from an area, which goats can do when you use goat management. So also, as we mentioned, they climb up trees, so say about 3 feet up. You're going to get 3 feet up and all the vegetation down below. Another thing that is good is that people always ask us the success. How long is it going to take? Well, we can kind of gauge what's in there for species, what they like. However, it also depends on if you're going to have 5 days of wet rain, you're going to have the goats in the shelter. They're not going to want to be eaten because they don't like to get wet. Also, if you're in a wetland area, it's going to puddle, and the goats don't like to get their little feet wet. Sheep, on the other hand, will keep going at it. So that's another good reason why you can have both species in there, both animals. Another thing with the goats is what was I going to say? You can only go in certain areas with the goats versus the sheep. So the sheep will go in areas that are a little bit wetter. So another thing is if it's too hot, they might not eat. So you're going to have a certain amount of time that breaks up. So your time is going to vary based on the weather conditions of that area, as well as if it's shaded versus sunny. So you're going to have animals. Do goats work at night? Does anyone know? Do goats work at night?
No.
No? Actually, they work 24/7. Those little guys will sit down and they do something called chew their cud, but they actually do a lot of their work throughout the day. So we actually leave them in there 24 hours. We don't lock them in the shelter, and that's another reason why we have the animals,
Right.
like the llama and the dogs, to protect
They
them.
stay right there.
Yeah.
They leave about 7 hours a day, they actually eat. And they'll eat 7 pounds a piece for the day. That's a lot of greenery. And so they eat 7 pounds, and then they'll lay around, as Michelle said, and chew their cud. And that's their way of digesting and keep going. So they like it in the morning, and they like it in the afternoon, during the end of the day. It keeps them out of the heat in the middle of the day. They'll be there, but you'll find them loafing under the trees in the shade, like I like to do a little bit more often. So.
Yep. So that's how we kind of measure success. We sometimes tell people an estimate of how much time. We figure out how many goats we might need. A goat can eat up to 8 pounds a day. So if you have 1 goat, they can eat a lot of shrubbery.
Last slide?
Yes. The comparison. So everyone likes cute goats, so I put a few cute goat sign pictures on here. So we have a variety of different goats, which we'll show on the poster here. But we have fainting goats, we have boar goats, and we have Nigerian dwarf goats. So those are the 3 types of goats that we use. We know that boars
Which
are...
one is which?
The floppy ear one up on the upper right is a boar goat. They're my favorite because they're just every one of Lucy's. That's Lucy, I think. Her baby is behind her, that one with a little bit of horns. So those are boar goats. They have long floppy ears and they tend to be a little bit larger. We have fainting goat and Nigerian dwarfs.
This is
And
a Nigerian dwarf.
yeah.
They're not small like you think, and that's
They're
a
not.
Nigerian dwarf.
Yeah, so they're considered pygmy goat. They're smaller than the usual goats that get really high, but they're still, they get about, like that guy's probably still growing a little bit.
And this guy with the horns, these are fainting goats, fainting goat, fainting goat, fainting goat, fainting goats over here.
Yeah,
Mostly fainting goats.
and the
Why do
low,
you use 3 different goats?
Just happen to have them.
yeah.
However, we're probably going to do some little crossbreeding next year. The boar goats are excellent because they're a bigger goat. They climb and they will reach up. They'll be about as big as my boy. They'll reach up. Their feet will be this high on a tree. And they'll be stretching. So they're a little bit bigger and they're really aggressive. They'll, as you said earlier, they'll take a bush. They'll knock a bush over with their weight. They'll get it over, and then the other goats grab onto it and they all start eating it. So they're very good at it like that. The fainting goats that's typically what we have. Maureen has a whole flock of fainting goats. They're all registered. She's used them for that reason. And we had a couple little Nigerian dwarfs who we liked, so we had them around. We only keep male fainting goats right now because we don't want any accidents up there. We want to keep them pure at this point in time, and that's just the type of goat we have. The other thing about it is the types of goats that we have. We didn't talk very much about a solar farm, and I want to talk a little bit about it.
We can talk.
What happens is most goats will jump on things. They'll climb on your cars. That's the nature of a goat. You know, they jump fences. They do everything. These three breeds that we're using right here don't seem to jump at all. They don't climb. They don't jump fences. They don't get out. They're not a nuisance like that. And if I'm bringing them to strange places and people's houses, I don't want goats that are jumping out. So in solar farms, we've seen so many solar farms erupting now. They're all over the place. Is that goats got a bad rap because what will happen is people who are using them, certain types of goats will jump more than others. They'll jump up on the solar panels, and that's a no-no. So what happens now in the industry, if you say the word goat, they don't really want to know about it, even though my goats don't jump, so we just don't talk about it. But we use sheep. And over at Spring Hill Farm here, we used their solar farm up there at Spring Hill in Bradford, and they go underneath the solar panels. Solar panels act as shade for them. They act as a nice place for the grass to grow. But when it comes time for manpower to mow it, they can mow between, but underneath it, they have to get in by hand and mow underneath the solar panels. Well, the sheep just love it on the solar panels, and they hang out and they just graze right on through. So we stay away from goats. So we have different goats. It's just the way it is that we have different goats. But what we do have is goats that don't jump. So that's one of the characteristics we want.
However, you can train them to jump, and that's what I've done for the goat yoga. So on the next slide, in just a second we'll flip, you'll see some goats on top of people's backs.
Go ahead, move on.
But
we don't need to talk about price.
yeah, this is just a little comparison shot of what we do. But the goats are cute, and that's why everyone likes them. So this is a little thank you for everyone that was coming tonight to appreciate it. Goats are a lot of fun in a lot of different ways, not only to see them browsing and doing their natural thing behind you, but goats are very social animals. They like interaction with each other, and they like interaction with people. And this year we had a lot of fun bringing smiles to people that just came out of remission from cancer, people that had just recently lost people that came for team building. We had some school systems come, adults who usually we cater to. And this is some great pictures. This goat, the baby goat on the left, is a little fainting goat, and we do goat safety, which means my niece in the top picture, she helps me do, basically we're going and helping people in the goat yoga positions to make sure the goat's safe. But the goats don't usually jump really high. We have a lot of them that will jump in a position called downward dog, downward goat in our case when we do it at our farm. And goats basically jump right on you. So the one on the right, the clown, we dressed him up for Halloween. He jumped right on her back. And if people are a little bit higher, they'll jump on their back. So that's a lot of fun too. So feel free to come. We'll be doing that again next year. And
if you have any questions, we're going to be here, and we'll be happy to talk to you about anything you have with the goats. There's a sample of some of the fencing over there, because that's people ask about like that.
Let's
Over
do
here on
that.
the
That's
board
what we're
there.
going to do, is go over and see a few of the projects, and you can also let's pass around a piece of the fence. Now the fence is usually 40 inches, so this is just a piece for feeling like how the wires are. Goats are not electrocuted. It's actually for predators. They know not to go next to the electric fence.
So I think that that's a pretty heavy board.
Just finished, and we just got printed. This basically is our presentation, our abstract that talks about our goals, what we're doing with goats, and it tells you a little bit of background about our farm and our operations. So this poster is going to be held at a poster session on during the evening, and the other presentation, which like I said, that one isn't what we're going to be doing, but pieces of that presentation will be presented on how to use effective goat browsing. It's going to be a little bit more, the audience is a little bit different than we had tonight, so there's a little bit more knowledge about that, and we're not going to be talking about our operations, the bigger scope of how we're using our goats for the operations of goat browsing. So this poster and that will supplement each other, but they're going to be at two different times. The other one is an oral presentation that we'll be giving during the day, and it'll be about a 15-minute talk followed by about 5 minutes questions.
You know, it'll be interesting, there's all kinds of different clientele there. There'll be a lot of Department of Defense personnel, Park Service type of personnel, and other things like that. So one would ask, what's the Department of Defense, besides being a huge landlord, what does he want? We've actually been in discussions with a base, it's a secret base that they have, and they have to control their fences. They have to keep by their own regulations within the perimeter 6 inches, so nobody can see what's going on. They've tried burning it, they've tried chemical in 100 acres of it, they've tried everything, and so they like to do now is to try goats and sheep, because nothing else has been working. Those items haven't. Other places that they'll use it in the Department of Defense, they may have munitions areas where they're storing ammunition. They don't want mowers in there, they don't want hitting rocks, and they don't want sparks and stuff like that, and they'll graze through those areas. So there's a lot of uses for them. They're alternative uses instead of using a mower, and it works out well. It's always cheaper to use a mower if you can. But
So
now,
this little thing that you had done up is electrical fencing, and it's only part of one, so they're
It's
usually
just
about
pieces, yeah.
40 inches, so it's a little bit higher.
You can't see it on the camera, but these really, really fine little stainless steel wires going through this plastic net. It's about this high.
And it comes in sections that we kind of sprawl out, and we have hundreds of it.
Thousands of people.
Thousands of it.
Why don't you tell people how they can reach you, Michelle?
So one thing that we do have is we have a big following, almost 1,400 people on Facebook. We use Facebook a lot for our day-to-day kind of fun things. And it's a handle on Facebook is at GoatsTo, the number 2, go. And that's how you can find us on Facebook. The other quick way of doing that is GoatsToGo, TO.farm is our website. And we have our services, points of contact on there, and also merchandise. That's one thing we started doing this summer. I'm wearing one of our t-shirts that says GoatsToGo, and on the back we have a goat. We also have t-shirts, tank tops, that have been a big seller because people like that. We also have magnets. My father has a phone because he does the old-fashioned way, so his is 508-451-1987. And for people that like the internet, it's greatrockfarm@gmail.com, all one word.